we learned something there. People buy energy.
They do.
They buy vibe. They buy engagement.
I was actually meeting our stylist at my house later that day because he was going to help me pick out some outfits to take to Bali. Like I was like I was living life, you know, and I was going to go treat myself at this med spa, and I literally almost died.
And come to find out, it was real. And they could just go in, just like maybe the IRS, and just take $135,000 out of your savings account.
It was.
Welcome back to another episode of She Means Millions. I'm your host. No, we've never done that before.
That's okay. You can be the host.
Well,
go for it, girl.
Aren't we each host?
Yeah, but I was going to queue up the three.
Okay, all right. That's fair.
I guess I'm the co-host.
Everybody noticing what I'm going through right here? Just saying.
Listen, let's just get into the damn show. Okay, so I am not going to introduce myself, but I'm Briana.
Okay. I'm not going to introduce myself either, but I'm Sandra.
I'm the husband. How about that?
Yeah.
I'm Kim.
Yeah. And so, today I thought that we could dive into something a little bit on the deep side, and we get questions about it on our Ask cards always, usually, and that is how we navigate tough periods. And I think that that's something that is like an issue that every entrepreneur every person, entrepreneur or not, everybody faces tough times where they just want to give up.
Yeah.
And I think that if there's one thing that this family has proven over and over, it's that we are resilient. And we could probably talk about this for hours.
Yeah. Can't be in business as long as we have and not be resilient.
Yeah.
You know, 26 years. If you just look at all the things that have gone on over the last 26 years, from, you know, the creation of Google. Actually, Google's been around longer, but it's not been a verb, you know, for 26 years. And of course, you know, social media and the market shifts and changes, and, you know, the internet bust and the market crash and COVID and just all the things. And that doesn't even describe or take into effect the personal, you know, catastrophes.
Yeah.
You know, losses, scares, you know, all the things that we've endured over the past 25 plus years. Yeah.
What's something, Sandra, what's something in particular that you can think of? So I remember, you know, like our first sponsor and talking to them about sponsoring our very first conference. And what made it tough was, because it was our first conference, all we could do is give a projection of what we were shooting for, what our goal was. This is where you think, well, our goal was, you know, 300 to 400 people. That was our goal. So that was our projection in terms of what our attendance would be like. And on the day of the event, our attendance was like 79. I mean, it was like, you know, we're doing everything we can. I remember you were, that was the only time I remember where you kind of collapsed to the floor and I put my arms around you like a bear hug. You know what I mean?
I felt so responsible.
We both did, but
we've never done a conference before. We really didn't know what we were doing.
Exactly.
I mean, I'd barely thrown a dinner party, let alone put on a conference.
Yeah.
And so we just put this project. We were brand new. I mean, we just launched in September, and we were doing our first conference that following May. So we were only in business 7-8 months. And we thought, we'll have 300 or 400 people there.
All I can say is, a good thing you were crying, because then that took care of me. I didn't have to cry.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. I was like, they're going to ask us for their money back, you know, and we'd spent it.
Yeah. And I remember the day of the conference itself. It was a long hallway. We were at a 5-star hotel in Dallas called the Adolphus. Very classy. It looked fantastic. I think you contacted all the grocery stores to see if
I
can I get the
did.
flowers you're going to throw away? Or,
I did. There
that?
was a grocery chain. There is a grocery chain still in Dallas called Tom Thumbs, and somebody told me that, you could call them, and at the end of every week they get a replenishment in their florist department of new flowers, so they throw away old flowers, the old flowers. And so I called, since we were doing our event over a weekend, I called them, and they would donate. Every store would donate an arrangement. And so I called them, and I called each store one at a time, and I tried to get them to coordinate, and they were like, we can't coordinate. This one store might do yellow, another store might do red, another store might do pink or whatever. They're like, it just depends on what flowers we have left over. And I said, okay. I was driving a Volvo at the time, and the day before the conference, there I am, Sandra, driving to every Tom Thumbs. There had to be like 12 of them in and around the area, and running in and getting the arrangement and putting it in the car, right? And gathering them and having them in the trunk, having them on the floor, having them in the back seat, in the front seat, on the floor, whatever. And that was me then driving all the way to this 5-star hotel, unloading all these flower arrangements.
so we could put them at the
Tables
stage
and
the table and on the stage to create, this whole look. And prior to the event, right, as we were leading up to it, because our attendance was, at that point, it was like 71 or so, and and I was writing copy for the email invites that we'd sent out, and I remember writing the copy, trying to write in Sandra's voice, and we both read it, and we realized that the copy at that time was kind of like, ladies, this is the time where we've got to come together and pull together, and
We sounded so desperate.
yeah, we sounded so desperate. We realized as we were reading, we sound so desperate, come in
Please
and join
come,
us.
please come.
Right. And we didn't send that out. We tore that up and wrote another email.
Yeah.
And that email said, we're so excited to be seeing you in another week. We
All
put together
the right people will be in the room.
all the right, and that increased our attendance, by 8. We got 8 more. Got to 79. And I mean, we just were feeling so distraught, so your whole thing around navigating, so distraught. I remember we get to we're actually at the venue now. Sandra and I are walking in one way, and the sponsor is walking toward us from the other way.
Long haul.
And this is when I discovered that Sandra had another career, because she could talk with her mouth closed. I mean, we're walking toward them.
Oh my God, here they come.
Yeah.
Oh, how are we going to handle this? What are they going to do? What are they going to say?
So we meet up with each other in the middle, and they reached out and hugged us, and they said, I can't get over
The energy in the
energy,
room.
the people, everyone is so nice, and it's electric inside there.
No mention of the numbers.
Yeah, actually, they did. They said, "Oh my God, there's got to be 400 people in there." Now, let me tell you something.
Oh, that's crazy.
This was Sandra and I. This is our big aha. Prior to the event, these tables were set up for 8 people at a round. We had them set it for 4 people at a round.
We had lots of tables.
So it's spread out. And we did not realize this years in advance that we were doing social distancing way back then before it was popular. And had lots of aisleway for people to walk around the tables. It gave the appearance of being much bigger. And so when they said there must be 400 people in there, Sandra and I are thinking, what? They showed up? Oh my God, they showed up. We're thinking the crowd came through. Right?
Yeah,
well,
we had all these walk-ups, you know.
It wasn't the case. However, we learned something there. People buy energy.
They do.
They buy vibe. They buy engagement.
It's not the size of the crowd; it's the right crowd.
It's the right crowd.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They buy authenticity. They buy hope. You know what I'm saying? All the positive things that make a person feel good. And we had it. We had it at that event. Everybody was pumped up.
Yes.
We had spent a lot of money. To us, it was a lot of money, but it was thousands of dollars in flying speakers in and
paying for speakers. We had a little sound system. It looked like the Wizard of Oz in the corner.
Yeah.
The movie, The Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain, and that was Kim. Kim was the sound guy.
I was the sound guy.
It was about the size of for people that could remember turntables.
Yeah.
It was about the size of turntables. I think we rented it and they taught us how to use the knobs or whatever. And that would be you in the corner adjusting the sound. It's
So
I
funny.
think back to just the craziness of.
And I'd bring out my
what you
radio
do.
voice every now and then. Up next is Roseanne.
That's so funny.
But people loved it.
Yeah.
And the meals were first class. And I even remember other leaders of other women's groups, because we were researching people and what was going on, had flown in, had bought tickets to our event because they were intrigued about what are these people doing, But the whole thing is that was a frightening time for us, a lot of anxiety, a lot of prayers. And to see that you show up, you put on your best face, you put on your best intention.
And we lost money on that event, but it became, when you look at the cost of the event by itself, but what we gained was the trajectory of the business. There were people that had, women who had brought friends from other cities that inquired about being a managing director, and before you knew it, it became really, as I look back, a real launch pad.
Well, the biggest surprise of all is that you were an MC. You didn't speak.
Oh.
You didn't teach.
Yeah.
It was like your expertise and knowledge. Now here you are, your master's degree, Gestalt Institute certification, and all the work that you've done, right?
Right.
And on your own stage, in the beginning,
Yes.
you didn't feel confident.
Worthy.
Yeah, but would you say confidence
And
too?
confident, for sure.
To get on that stage and teach when she had been doing it in corporate America.
Yeah.
But in this class, you referred to the other speakers. It was pretty.
Yeah.
It was pretty
Yeah.
amazing. That was a major navigation moment for us.
Yeah.
To get through that, to navigate through that, and as you said, it created a spinoff of other things.
Yeah.
A lot of press.
What comes to mind for you?
For navigating tough times.
Yeah.
I mean, the obvious for me, the first one that comes to mind is my health scare.
For sure. So fresh
That was
still, yeah.
That was the hardest chapter of my life.
Me
Scariest,
too. Me too. As a mother.
Yeah. In April 2024, I was literally just going for an outpatient driving home. I had plans later that day. I was actually meeting our stylist at my house later that day because he was going to help me pick out some outfits to take to Bali. Like I was I was living life, and I was going to go treat myself at this med spa, and I literally almost died.
Literally.
And that was definitely getting through that. And then also when I finally started to come to, and I realized it's April, and I sold an event, my AI Edge event, that June. And I felt such a responsibility to these women to get it together. And I don't think that they realize how much of a driving force and motivator that they were for me.
Yeah, it inspired you.
Yeah.
I mean, when I saw you were working 8 to 10 hours a day, one therapy after another therapy after another therapy, you know what I mean, to get better and better. And I was like, there ain't no way this is happening. Yeah. But I didn't want to say anything to you because you saw it as the motivator.
It was. And I feel like everything in my life, if I don't have a deadline or a date or some kind of skin in the game, then it's not going to happen. And so I think that's for me a lesson with navigating tough times is put a date on the calendar that's going to really hold you accountable to pushing through it.
Yeah.
Because
and then don't keep it a secret, communicate it, because then, this is the whole thing about people these are my goals and I'm just going to keep them to myself.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's easy to blow it off when you haven't told anyone.
Exactly.
But when you put it down, write it down, communicate it. And, Kim, you always used to say, if we want to get something done in the house, let's plan a party. Because there's something about having people come that makes you get that thing done, right?
It is. And I'll never forget my first day. Because I went through, hospital to inpatient therapy where I lived at a therapy rehabilitation center. And then I got discharged and started outpatient where I was driving back and forth. My first day, at my outpatient therapy, I was in the speech therapist office / cognitive therapy. It was like speech / cognitive therapy. And they're doing that initial kind of testing to see what they're working with, you know? And she asked me, I can't remember exactly what she asked me. Maybe I just volunteered it. And I just said, I just need you to know I need to be out of here by June 13th. I need to be graduated. I need to be better by June 13th. Yeah, That's what I told her. I said, I need you to get me better by June 13th. And she was like, okay, we'll do our best. We'll work on that, you know. But you could tell on her face that she was like, that is not going to happen. And I'm like, well, you wait, you know, you wait. And that's why I would get so insulted when I would go to therapy and they'd put me in some kind of a group therapy task where I just felt like this is not relevant to my recovery at all. Like they would put us in a group and have us play the board game, like headbands. And I think that it was supposed to be a cognitive exercise because the whole thing is somebody has a headband on with a card that has like Marilyn Monroe. And you have to basically give them clues as to what's on your forehead.
So they can guess it.
So that you can guess what's on your forehead. You can't see what's on your forehead. But imagine you're giving me clues as to what's on my forehead, what's the name or what's the place or the thing. So I think that was the point of it. But to me, it was an insult. I was like, don't give me a board game, headbands. Yeah. This is not conducive to what I need to learn to do. I need to be able to speak. I need to remember things and I need to be able to drive. That's why I'm here. That's what I need to focus on. Let's do that and then get me out of here because I got places to be, you know? And I think that having that deadline and that goal is what really helped me drive through that process. The first was getting home. I wanted to get out of inpatient therapy and get home because I missed my baby. And then once I was home and I had the next stage, it's like, I need to get back to work.
Yeah.
I needed a reason.
Yeah.
You know? And I think.
And of course, secretly, they were telling us you may never drive again.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I was like, well, you know, she's going to have a driver then. How about that? I've always wanted one. She's going to get one, you know, kind of thing. It was a scary time. You know, I can tell you that, you know, I've searched long and hard around all the meaning that I can make of that time because as a mother, and now you're a mother, you can only imagine, right? I mean, it was just the worst, and the blessing that I've taken from it is that I now know what a bad day is. And nothing has, I mean, I will say nothing since that day, April 11th, has ever even come close to I just don't have bad days anymore. Yeah. I might have a bad moment, but I can so quickly, you know, get out of it because I know what a bad day is when you walk into the hospital and see your child on life support, you know, and it has reshaped how I viewed the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Including you know how much I love you and I've always loved you, but just, there isn't a day that doesn't go by, Briana, to this day. There's a day that doesn't go by that I don't thank God for your recovery. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember I had one specific moment where I came to terms with the fact that, you know, I lost you. I was by myself. And the pain was so great. It's like I was like, oh my God, don't go there, don't go there. You know what I mean? It was almost like I emotionally pushed myself away from that reality because I could not handle it. And so my attitude through the whole thing was hope. She's going to get through this. She's going to, you know what I mean? I found that to be a better use of my time and my preservation. Yeah. To not allow myself, because man, when I touched that, it was too great. It was literally too great. It would have broke me. Yeah. I mean, you know, but in navigating. That was our tough time. what other thoughts do you have on navigating through, as you think back?
Oh, I mean, I remember, COVID. I mean, we were a 100% live event business. We'd had the best year ever in 2019, and we were 30% above plan for January and February of 2020. We had just completed our Platinum Summit, our 2.5-day private Platinum Summit for our Platinum members. We're starting to hear things about COVID. I left the Platinum Summit. I think I did 2 events. I want to say Calabasas and Orange County, and came home, and the world shut down.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
The world shut down. And our business was 100% live events. And we weren't online. We weren't doing online events at all in any way. And we didn't have the technology to manage the chapters, to be able to register people, how to facilitate it. Most people didn't have Zoom accounts. A lot of people didn't even know what Zoom was. We had just gone to I think it was the first Zoomtopia. They used to do a conference, and we'd heard about this thing called Zoom, and Richard Branson was speaking there, and we said, let's go find out what this is all about.
I do remember that we were disappointed that we found out that Richard Branson was being zoomed in.
And we should have figured that out, but we didn't. It wasn't obvious
wasn't
to
there
us.
in person.
Since it was a Zoomtopia, they were demonstrating how Zoom works on a stage.
Yeah.
And they zoomed him in. Anyway, so we knew that there was this technology that existed, but a lot of people just didn't know it. None of our managing directors, I don't believe at the time that I can recall, had a Zoom account. We called them and said, how do we open up business accounts? And, but I do remember at one point going, it's been 20 years. It was our 20th anniversary. And I was thinking, I don't know, do I have the stamina, the strength to reinvent this business 100%? I remember having moments thinking, 20 years is not a bad run, And then I remember being in the shower, having an ugly cry, just feeling so overwhelmed. The mayor, I think it was, one of the judges in the area that we worked, shut down the work area, and so everybody had to go home to work. But not all of our employees had computers to work from home, and they weren't wired in to be able to get access to all of our online files. And they were looking to us to get them set up and to make that investment and all of that kind of thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, it was just coming from every direction. And I remembered just wondering how we were going to do this. And I was crying in the shower. And then there's just something that happens for me in the shower. It's almost like a cleansing. And I was just like, if I go out, I'm going out on my terms. I'm not going out because of COVID.
Yeah.
We are going to figure this out. But it was scary. I'll tell you one thing that happened, and a lot of people don't know this, but when you take credit cards, you sign a lot of paperwork when you take people's credit cards. And we got an email. I got an email from not the bank, but the credit card company that works with the bank to process the cards.
Yeah, behind the scenes for the bank, yeah.
Yeah, remember that?
Yeah.
And they said that they were going to take $135,000 out of my business savings account. And they could just go in and take that money. And I remember forwarding it to I had a new business banker at the time, because the business banker that I had left the bank, and I hadn't gotten to know her very well yet. And I forwarded it to her, and I'm like, is this real? And she replied back, and she says, oh, no, it's not real. You can disregard it. It's called phishing, that
PH.
Yeah, a phishing thing. And I said, oh, great. But there was something on the back of my neck that was just like little hairs, like, I don't know. And so I ended up contacting the guy that was my business banker and sending it to him. He said, send it over. I'll look at it. And he wrote me back. He said, no, Sandra, I actually think this is real. And so I went back to her and walked it up the chain, and come to find out it was real. And they could just go in, just like maybe the IRS, and just take $135,000 out of your savings account.
It was really bizarre too, Sandra, because it was at a time when everybody's trying to figure it out. Our income from events went to nothing.
Nothing.
Right? So it's almost like, oh, let's stab them.
Yeah.
You know, while they're down.
Yeah,
right?
I'm thinking I'm going to take, the money out of my savings to retool the business to go online. And and I look them up. I'd never even heard of this company before. And they were a $14 billion company. And I am so mad. It's not funny. And so I find out who's the boss up the chain. And I get a hold of this guy. His name is Richard, I'll never forget, in New York. And I get his phone number and I call him, and I get his voicemail, and I leave a message, and I said, I'm Sandra Yancey, and I explained the situation, and I said, and you and I need to talk. And I said, I know that I'm a really small fish in the ocean of clients that you have, but I want you to know one thing, and that is that I'm also a CNN American hero. And while that might not seem relevant to this at all, what I want you to know is CNN did a big story on me, and I happen to have the producers' names and phone numbers in my phone, and I think this is a story. That you are allowing this billion-dollar company to come after small businesses like me and grab, when I've never had an issue, ever had an issue with credit cards, and that what they were doing is they were trying to get ahead of what must have been happening, and that was companies were getting these runs on their credit cards of people like stop payment kind of thing. And anyway, and don't you know, he called me back. It got a call back.
Yeah,
and the next thing I know, I had a meeting the next morning at 9 o'clock in the morning for us, which was 8 o'clock in the morning for them. And let me just tell you, I could tell when we were on a speakerphone, this before Zoom, of course, so we're all on this big speakerphone. I could tell, how you know when you're on a speakerphone. And I just said, okay, so I think everybody needs to introduce themselves. I want to know who's on this call. And there were like 8 of them, including the guy that wrote the letter to me. And there was me, you, and our CFO, Carrie, on the line. And I just said, so you called the meeting. What do you want to talk about? And the guy, Vaughn was his name, said, well, I just want you to know, we've reviewed your account, and, we're sorry for all the alarm, and we're not taking the $135,000. And I said, well, that's great, and I just want you to know, my ear is to the ground. And I better not find out that you're doing this to all of my members too.
So it's really, you really advocated for yourself and the company, and I think there's a lesson in that.
Yeah.
In terms of the choices at that time could just been, look what this is, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to pay them, right?
Yeah.
Versus saying, wait, stop the train.
Yeah.
This is not right. What
Yeah.
you're doing is wrong. I got a stellar relationship with you. I don't deserve this kind of treatment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because at that time you couldn't negotiate with other banking institutions and things like that. I mean, it was a tough period.
Yeah.
Tough time.
Tough times, right?
Yeah.
All different kinds of challenges that we have, personal, business.
I think too, we've learned some lessons, navigated some lessons in what I what do I want to classify this as? I've had in my career 2 occasions where 2 males within the company. One was in the eWomen Network, the other one was in my advertising agency. That happened to go a little further. In my advertising agency, I had a guy who who was a vice president, take one of our employees who was new out to dinner, and decided to tell her about his personal life and what his home life wasn't, and that kind of thing. And he shouldn't have been doing that.
Yeah.
And that day, I found out that next morning what had happened, and
She was very uncomfortable with it.
yeah. And by the end of the day, I had to let him go. Like, I remember saying to him, and let's just call him Jack for now, okay? But I remember saying to him, Jack, you had no business talking. You weren't authorized by the company or whatever. But I mean, the fact of the matter was, he was hitting on her and trying to figure out how he could have a relationship with her. And I had to end that right away. And I had the same thing happen in the eWomen Network, where someone smart, talented, went to an eWomen Network event, drank a little bit too much, and became flirty with I think one of our
managing directors.
Managing directors, and
she complained, and we took fast action. Will not be tolerated.
It will not be tolerated.
Walked him to the door. He was fired.
It's just really important that that you do move on these things. I tell you, when you got any kind of cancer in your organization, it's something that we've learned that you have to be decisive and you have to be quick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't let it fester.
Yeah.
Because you pay a price for it.
I think the thing that's popping up for me is I'm listening to each of us talk about the hard times that we've navigated, whether they're getting the business off the ground in that first conference, or being 20 years in and getting knocked down again, or dealing with a health scare in the middle of it. Every single common denominator with navigating each and every one of these, I think, has, for me, the word that's popping up is just being relentless.
Yeah.
And I think that is the secret to navigating any tough time in your life, is being relentless and knowing that you have a purpose. And if it's a calling, you say it all the time. You can give up on a dream, but you can't give up on a calling. So even when you want to, or even when all the odds are stacked against you, or you're given, a 1% chance to live, like, what does that 1% mean? Like, lean into that.
Yeah.
Because you could be that 1%.
Yes.
Even when every single odd is stacked against you and things are not looking good, you're not getting the numbers you want, the business model has been shattered because of a pandemic that's out of your control, your health gets taken away from you in a nanosecond. If there is any glimmer of hope, then you just have to lean into the glimmer.
Yeah.
And just know that you are going to figure it out. If it is your calling, you cannot give up on it. And that is the secret to navigating.
Yeah, it's my mother used to talk about, you have two voices in your head, like two wolves. It's based on a fable, I believe, and one is called fear, and one is called faith. Mm-hmm. And the question is, which one wins?
Which one wins, fear or faith?
The one you feed.
Yes.
And so if you feed fear, you'll prove yourself, that all of those fears will come true, because you will act in accordance with it.
Yeah.
But if you lean into that faith, even if it's just 1%, that 1% is like just a flicker. And we all know that one flicker can turn into a flame, and a flame, right, can really burn bright.
Yeah.
Yeah. Powerful. Great summary.
I hear, because a lot of our members are solopreneurs, and they have either a small staff to no staff to just working with VAs. But I will tell you, I think it's critical that you as the leader have to project positivity, have to project forward momentum, have to evolve. Because if you don't evolve, you'll be evicted. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. You become, an asset that's not an asset anymore. You know what I mean? Right. That people would just go by you. Because, listen, things happen so quick. There's no way that we as entrepreneurs can keep up with it all. I mean, the assortment, variety, and the total avalanche of get rich quick, do this, do that. I mean, and I've been a victim of it. I mean, I've been a victim where I bought a program myself, and I should have never done it, because it went against my performance nature. The way I perform, it went against my nature.
Yeah. You
know what I mean? But I bought it because it was a good sales pitch. I love, as a salesperson, I loved a good sales pitch. And I think it's just really, when you really get down to looking from an introspective standpoint at yourself and how you actually operate and how you perform the best, that will help you make informed decisions about where you invest money, where you spend your time, But I think most people I talk to have all been kind of victims themselves of buying something that they did not follow through with. They bought it, but they didn't follow through with it.
I think it's a rite of passage. I mean, we all have that stripe. We've got to learn certain lessons, all of us, I think.
We do.
In some form or fashion. But I will end with this, and that is, it's so important to know who you're surrounding yourself with, because those people, they fill your tank when you're running on empty, and everybody needs to be reminded that they're not in it by themselves. And the best way to ruin a really great team is to tolerate a bad performer. Right? So, making sure that you're constantly doing your people math, who's adding and multiplying versus who's dividing, and subtracting, and up-leveling your circle is, I think, so important in up-leveling your impact.
I love it. Well, y'all, I think that is a beautiful cap on today's episode. So why don't we pick up on the next one? So until then, she doesn't just mean business. She means millions.